Greetings, artists. Welcome. I'm Mrs. Schmidt, and we're going to talk about pop art today. You might be wondering, what is pop art? And we're also going to be creating what I call pop art shoes. So let's get started. First of all, pop art describes art made using things from popular culture and/or media. This movement started in the 1950s and 60s and is characterized by being very colorful and bold. If you're familiar with Austin Powers, there are movies about the character Austin Powers, you will see pop art theme kind of throughout the whole movie. Now, you will see some images here by different pop artists. Very, again, colorful, bold, very reminiscent of mass production. When you go to your Google Classroom, there will be a video called Unlock Art, Pop Art. I want you to click on that and watch it. It's only a 5-minute video, and it will really help to describe what pop art is all about. We're going to look at some artists here that produced work in this style. One is named Wayne Thiebaud. He became very famous for his paintings of pastries and cakes, suckers, things of popular culture. Often you'd see these kinds of things in bakeries and diners. And so, again, mass production was kind of the key, celebrating popular culture. His color schemes are very recognizable. This one in particular looks like it has a lot of kind of pastel colors to it. And yet this one has a lot of contrast, strong shadows, bright whites, and a lot of this is reminiscent of some of the advertising from the time. Again, bubblegum machines were popular at that time in the 1950s and 60s. Here's another artist who's a pop artist. His name is Peter Max. And he had very bright, bold colors throughout his work. Many of his paintings kind of are reminiscent of the psychedelic kind of artwork of the 1960s, as you can see here. In addition, we see popular culture presented in comic book characters and symbols of liberty and freedom. He did a whole series of paintings based on the Statue of Liberty. In addition, Andy Warhol, you will hear quite a bit about Andy Warhol in the video, but Andy Warhol was initially a graphic artist. He was involved in commercial art, creating art to sell products. And eventually he moved into kind of the fine arts, but he brought with him a lot of his experience with the commercial arts. And so if you've ever seen huge, it's called a screen print that was made, but it's kind of like printmaking, anyhow, of the soup cans. That is Andy Warhol. Again, questioning what is art, what is fine art, and how does that differentiate from like the graphic arts and the commercial arts. Again, we see cartoon characters being presented. On a previous slide, we had images of Marilyn Monroe, who was very much an icon. And here we see a very present event that happened during the time of this pop culture where man landed on the moon. Now, famous pop artist Andy Warhol, who we just saw his work, got his start drawing women's shoes for magazines. And again, we said he was a graphic artist and he created work to help sell things in popular culture. So we can see a couple of his drawings or illustrations for helping to sell shoes. So this is going to be our inspiration for creating our pop art shoes. In addition, shoes are something that are mass produced, just like the focus on pop art was about mass production, popular culture. Okay, so we are going to use our own shoe as our subject matter for this work. This will be a great opportunity to exercise your drawing skills and to really sharpen them, because a shoe does not move, so it's a great subject for learning to draw realistically. So let's add some pop. Number 1, closely study your shoe. Using pencil, draw your shoe. Notice the angles and the curves. Do your best to draw it realistically and large enough to fill most of the paper. Again, take your time. Do your best work. I want this to look realistic, not like a simplified cartoon shoe. We'll talk about how to go about drawing realistically a little bit later. Number 2, outline your shoe with a black Sharpie marker. Now, in our classroom, we have access to black Sharpie markers. If at home you do not, that's okay. Go ahead and use whatever you might have available. It may be a black pen, it may be a black Sharpie marker, or something that has a nice fine tip that you can outline your shoe well. So it gives it some punch and clarity in the lines. Number 3, use French curves, ruler, template, or work freehand to create pattern in the background and on the shoe. So with this one, you may not have French curves at home. You might have a ruler or some kind of template that you could use. If you look at my example down here, I used obviously a ruler for these lines here. And you'll see these kind of shapes. These are the French curves. Okay, I just traced the French curves to get some interesting shapes in the background. But you can do as much as you want freehand. Do not feel like you can't do the project without it. As you can see over here, these were done by another art teacher, and she just had her students create, sections in the background in which the students put in different patterns. Again, that's another option. Also, you'll notice that these examples all have the same kind of shoe. Now, in our case, we're each going to have a different shoe, that are our own personal shoe. So ours will not all look the same. And number 4, using Sharpie and markers, fill the page with, page and shoe with color. Make sure you work neatly. As you can see, think about how are you going to make your shoe stand out against the background. We're talking about using a lot of color for pop art. Some students leave their shoe black and white. If that's what you choose, that's okay. I chose to add patterns and designs on mine and use cool colors on my shoe, which contrasts with the warm colors in the background. You can choose how you go about it. You may want to choose something similar. You might want to use other things that you know about color theory in order to create your shoe so it pops out as the viewer looks at it. In addition, I also have some student work here that I wanted to share with you. These students both did a great job drawing their shoes. You can see, look at the detail and the attention to the craftsmanship in the lacing, in the texture, in the fur. This student really spent a lot of time studying her boot in order to draw it accurately. In addition, look at the background. She put a lot of thought into what she wanted to put in the background.
ladies and gentlemen. Today we are working on our pop art shoe. First of all, we need to start with a nice, realistic, detailed sketch of our shoe. And so I have a boot of mine here, and this is going to be my subject for my artwork. Now, I do have a piece of paper. It's about 9 by 12. You're welcome to use 8.5 by 11 or larger. 8.5 by 11 inch paper is basically what you would normally use, whether it's in a notebook or copy paper. That's standard paper size. If you have construction paper, kind of that size tends to be about 9 by 12. So what I'd like you to do is take your time. Do your best drawing. I'm going to closely study the angles, the curves, the folds and wrinkles, the angles, like of the belts here and so on, in order to make an accurate drawing of this boot. Now, you can also think of it in terms of simple shapes. So if I look at my boot, we kind of have what could be like a rectangle for this area right here. So I'm going to draw real lightly, but then I'm going to have to darken it so you can see. And I need to make sure I leave enough room for background, for my pop art background kind of, as well as for the front of the shoe, this part. Now, one thing that's really helpful for artists in getting an accurate drawing is to do some measuring. So if I use my pencil, I'm going to just measure from where the sole starts all the way up here, and it looks like it's a little bit longer than my pencil is. Now, if I measure over, so my rectangle that I've drawn on my paper goes to about here. I'm going to measure over, and from here to the end of the shoe is about the length of the pencil. So that means that this is a little bit taller than this portion here. So I can use this to measure. Again, I'm going to use my pencil to kind of help me lock in those measurements. So we're going to go like this. And artists often do this, and I'm making it a little bit shorter. Okay. Now, again, I have to remember that I need this dark enough where you can see. Most often when an artist draws something, they want to draw it nice and light, so that way it's easy to erase if need be. But I also, since I'm drawing and you need to see it on camera, I need to make sure that I'm drawing it bold enough for you to appreciate. Now, I'm going to just lightly draw this in. You may not even be seeing it quite yet because of the lightness of the pencil. I will quickly darken it here. Again, I'm going to check and make sure my measurement looks good. Oh, that's about right. It could maybe be a little bit shorter just based on my initial measurement. Now, I'm noticing kind of the angle here of the toe and the curve. All right, so I measured, and now I need to erase the area that didn't suit. And I notice this is not flat here, it's curved. So I'm going to make sure I follow that curve with my eyes and then let my pencil follow along with what I see. Now, it comes up for there's a heel, so actually I think I need to come up further. Now, one thing I also need to do is do some measuring, like in here. I can compare this to other widths in my shoe. So if I go like this, I measure about how long it is there, maybe I could take it to this and see, okay, it's a little bit wider going this way than where the heel area is. And really, one thing I did not accommodate for is, as I'm drawing this, I'm realizing, oh wait, this is this part, but the heel starts pretty far back here. Really, so I need to make sure that I am paying attention to those relationships. Drawing accurately is all about relationships. We kind of talked a little bit about measuring, but then you can compare those measurements to other parts of the shoe. So really, maybe I need to adjust this curve a little bit based on what I learned here. And I can, again, line up this, see, okay, it looks like it's about flat here, but then the curve starts to happen there. So again, here, the curve actually happens more there. So then it's a lot of adjusting. sometimes you're not going to get it right the first time, and you need to be diligent to go back and adjust so it looks accurate. Okay, so we have the heel, and then the sole comes down, and if I want, I can make that there's like little grooves here for the sole of the shoe. I don't have to make every one, I just imply it. It would take forever to just have to draw each one accurately. So, and then towards the end it kind of smooths out. I'll notice that it kind of curves around here. I can also see, because this is a three-dimensional object, I can see how this, you probably can't see the detail that I can see, but I can see that there is kind of a dimension, another dimension back here, and so I need to add that in as well. Now to add on some more of the details. Now, this is not straight up and down. There's a curve going out at the top, and then it kind of curves inward and then back around for the heel. It's a little bit further out than the sole of the shoe or the heel. Next, we have this nice angle with the zipper. It's got some different design elements to it. I'm going to just take the stitching this way. I'm kind of working quickly because I know that you're watching and waiting and excited to start your project. So I'm not going to maybe take the level of attention to detail as I would if this was my project. But I do want you to get the idea of how to go about making something that looks realistic. Let's see. So I'm noticing the seams here. It's a double seam. So, maybe what I want to do is go back and make the stitching. Right now I'm just trying to rough in the shape or the curve of it. And so I could do the same thing with the stitching along here. So now that this is overlapping that, I'm going to erase that. And it's like I need to adjust this a little bit. So even though I've had lots of drawing experience, I still have to go back and erase. Now, this was our rectangular shape to help us get started. That was just a guideline to use simple shapes to make something more complex. Now, I'm going to erase that because I really don't want that a part of my artwork. It's starting to look more like a boot. Next, I notice that if I allow my eyes to just follow this, it'll create what looks like a realistic representation. Oh, you know what? Before I do that, I'm going to come up here. And again, I kind of eyeball, okay, what's the distance here? What's the distance here? This is a little bit wider than this area here. So I need to make sure when I do my drawing, I make it a little bit wider. Similar to the thickness of this one here. So then, how far over is this? Is this halfway? It looks like it goes further than halfway. Definitely does. So maybe kind of over in this area is that, I'll call it that snap or that button. And this kind of has a curve to it. It's following the contour of the boot. Okay, and then around that snap. Now I can come in here, follow this angle, come here, kind of curves a little bit. The zipper continues down, and then down to here. Then there's what looks like a knitted area, and that kind of comes down. I'm following it with my eyes. Okay, this looks like it comes down a little bit closer to this buckle here, and I can kind of see where it's rounded there. And then we take this and bring that down, and then that joins the other zipper along there. Great. Now this looks a lot wider than what I have here, so I have to make an adjustment. And I'm watching, this is not straight across, I'm following the curve of the boot. Maybe I made this too wide. It's possible that this is too wide, and that's why this looks so much smaller. So I could go back and I could adjust that. Right now I'm letting my eye follow the curve of this area here. And there's some shadow here from that wrinkle. There's some shadow over here from that wrinkle. And then it kind of puckers and kind of comes down. Now, again, I do think I need to adjust this. It's not accurate. Now, does it look like it could be accurate? Sure it does. So, you know, as an artist, I could leave that. It's not disturbing to the viewer. It looks realistic. But I do want to teach you that I'm using comparisons, and so I want to make sure I'm doing it accurately. And you know, as I look at this, it's more upright than I had my initial drawing. So now I can modify and adjust. And then this came out like this, and this had some shadow under it like that. So that helps. This definitely looks a lot more accurate than it did before. Also, I see a seam back here, so I'm going to take that up. And this kind of comes out. Now, you know, it's a zipper. I'm not going to draw every little tooth, but I can make a zigzag kind of design there so it looks like it's a zipper. And it becomes apparent. And then here I can make it a little wider. All right, there we go. Then, you know, I can add the stitching around here, the belt buckle. This comes slightly before that seam. Again, looking at those comparisons. All right, if I look this over, I could add stitching here. What else does it need? I think most of the information is here. Oh, there is a little wrinkle here, which I could add in. Maybe I'll create a little bit more dramatic angle there. Overall, it looks pretty good. So now I will take my Sharpie and I will trace it. After that, I'll go about adding color and designs and patterns in the background. Oh, you know, one thing I noticed that I forgot to do is I can see the inside of the back of the shoe there, and it curves around and has a little stitch to it. Now, I am going to go ahead and outline. If you add patterns to your shoe for pop art, then go ahead and first trace with the black marker, then go on with your pencil and add on the different designs and patterns. So that way when you go to erase anything, it doesn't erase the shoe that you've worked so hard on. Now I'm finding that this marker has a thicker line than I was hoping for, but it is what it is. And sometimes you just have to deal with it. Or I could go looking for another marker and see if I have one that has a slightly lighter, like smaller tip. So my line here is quite kind of jagged, loose.